3 years ago, this same woman was standing at a bus stop on Ikorodu Road, counting the last coins in her hand, trying to decide whether she could afford transport or if she was walking home in the rain. But tonight, she is standing in the most expensive ballroom on Victoria Island, watching the most powerful people in Lagos line up just to greet her husband. Look at her carefully. She is not smiling because she is happy. She is smiling because she remembers every single person who once laughed at her. Her name is Adaeze Obi Martins, and this is the story of how one decision changed everything. Picture a ballroom on Victoria Island, Lagos. Not just any ballroom, the kind that costs more to rent for one evening than most people in this city earn in an entire year. The ceilings are high and dripping with chandeliers that throw gold light across everything they touch. The tables are dressed in white linen with fresh flowers flown in from Abuja that morning. The waiters move through the crowd in perfect silence, refilling glasses before they are even empty. The music is live, a full band playing the kind of Afrobeats that make even the oldest auntie in the room forget her knee pain and start moving her shoulders. Every important person in Lagos is here tonight. Politicians who smile too wide, business people who never stop calculating, society women in dresses that cost more than cars, old money sitting beside new money, both of them pretending they are not studying each other. This is Lagos at its most beautiful and its most dangerous. This is the room where deals are made with handshakes and enemies are made with eye contact. And at the very center of all of it stands a woman in a gold dress. She is not the loudest person in the room. She is not the one performing. She is simply standing, one hand holding a glass of water she has barely touched, watching everything around her with the calm, unhurried expression of a person who has already won a game that everyone else is still playing. Her name is Adaeze Obi Martins. She is 32 years old. She grew up in a one-bedroom flat in Surulere. She once ate garri 3 days in a row because her hospital salary had not come through and she refused to borrow from anyone. She knows what it feels like to stand at a bus stop in the rain and count the change in her purse and calculate whether she has enough for the bus or whether she is walking. She knows what it feels like to sit in a room full of family and have every single person in that room look at her like she is a problem that needs to be solved. She knows all of that. She carries all of that. But tonight, what she is carrying is the memory of every person in this very room who once laughed at her. And as she watches them cross the floor to shake her husband's hand, as she watches them straighten their clothes and rehearse their smiles before they approach, she is not angry. She is not bitter. She feels something much quieter and much more powerful than either of those things. She feels the particular satisfaction of a woman who was told she was wrong and waited patiently with absolute certainty for the day the truth would speak for itself. That day is tonight. But to understand tonight, we must go back to 3 years ago, back to a bus stop on Ikorodu Road, back to the beginning of the most important decision Adaeze Obi ever made in her life, and why every person who laughed at that decision should have kept their mouth closed. Adaeze Obi woke up every morning at 5:15. Not because she loved early mornings, not because she was one of those people who bounced out of bed full of energy and purpose. She woke up at 5:15 because Lagos demanded it, because the commute from Surulere to the government hospital in Yaba, where she worked as a nurse, was at least 45 minutes on a good day and nearly 2 hours on a bad one. And in Lagos, there were far more bad days than good ones. If you did not leave early, you arrived late. If you arrived late, you heard about it. Adaeze did not like hearing about it. The flat she shared with her younger sister Chisom was small but not unhappy. One bedroom that they shared with a curtain dividing their sleeping spaces. A sitting room that doubled as a study because Adaeze was always reading something, always trying to learn something new, always adding to the stack of books on the center table and the floor beside the window and the top of the small refrigerator. There was a nursing certificate on the wall beside a photograph of her father, a man with Adaeze's same eyes and the same calm expression, gone since she was 16, but present in every serious decision she made. She was 29 years old. She was beautiful the way women are beautiful when they have survived things. Not a decorated beauty, but a real one. The kind that does not require effort or announcement. She had friends who told her regularly that she was too serious, that she needed to relax, that she needed to go out more, wear more color, smile at more men, give people a chance. She listened to all of this with patience and then continued being exactly who she was. Her hospital salary came 4 months late as a standard practice. She had learnt not to plan around it and instead kept a personal emergency fund in a small envelope inside the lining of her hospital bag, the kind of quiet financial discipline her father had taught her, saving small amounts consistently because you couldn't always trust the systems around you, but you could always trust your own preparation. She was not wealthy. She was not connected. She did not have an uncle in Abuja, or a godfather with contracts, or a family name that opened doors. What she had was her skill, her intelligence, her unshakable sense of herself, and the kind of work ethic that makes people around you quietly uncomfortable because it reminds them of what is possible when you stop making excuses. That particular Tuesday morning, she stood at the kitchen window with her akara frying, watching the street below come alive with the familiar Lagos symphony of generators cutting off, Okada engines starting, mothers calling children, men arguing about nothing. She poured the tea, she plated the akara, she sat down and looked at her phone. 7 missed calls from her mother. She knew before she even pressed call back what the conversation would contain. Her mother operated on a very narrow frequency, and that frequency had one subject, one message, and one conclusion delivered in different arrangements, depending on what had triggered the call that particular day. Her mother's voice came through immediately, sharp and precise and pointed, the way only a woman who has been practicing a speech for months can be. Adaeze, your mate, Chidima, just bought land in Lekki Phase 2. Your mate, Uju, is pregnant with her second child in a 4-bedroom house in Aja. What are you doing with your life? What exactly is the plan? When Aunty Ngozi's son, Chukwuemeka, expressed interest in you, you said you were not feeling it. When the pharmacist at that private hospital sent a message, you said you were too busy. You are always too busy. You are always not feeling it. What exactly are you waiting for, Adaeze? A sign from heaven? Because I am your mother and I am telling you, you are not getting older. This city is not getting easier, and stubbornness is not a retirement plan. Adaeze listened to the whole thing. She always listened to the whole thing. Then she said, Mama, I am going to work. I will call you this evening. She ended the call. She sat for a moment with the phone on the table. She looked at her father's portrait on the wall. She thought about what he used to tell her. He used to say, Ada, the noise outside is loudest when you have not yet found the quiet inside yourself. Find the quiet. Everything else is just noise. She picked up her nursing bag. She went to work. She was not waiting for a rich man. She had never been waiting for a rich man. She was building something with her life in the city she lived in with the cards she was dealt. She had decided a long time ago that her story would not be written by other people's urgency. What she could not have known, what no amount of preparation or quiet or inner certainty could have told her, was that her story was about to introduce a character she had not planned for. A man who would not arrive with fanfare or announcement. A man who would arrive, in fact, by stepping backwards and breaking her phone on a concrete pavement.
The BRT bus stop on Ikurudu Road at 7 in the morning is not a place for the faint-hearted. It is a place where Lagos reveals its true self in full daylight. Hundreds of bodies packed into a space designed for far fewer. Everyone moving with individual purpose and collective impatience. The heat already building even in the early morning, the noise a wall of sound made up of conversations and arguments and bus conductors calling destinations and the mechanical groaning of vehicles that have seen too many Lagos roads and not enough maintenance. Adaeze stood in the queue with her nursing bag diagonal across her body, the way every woman in Lagos carries her bag, positioned to make it difficult for the hands that occasionally moved through crowds uninvited. She was reading something on her phone, a medical journal article she had been trying to finish for 3 days but kept getting interrupted. She was almost at the end of it when the bus arrived and the queue moved and the doors hissed open and the crowd surged forward with that particular Lagos urgency that acknowledges no personal space and no gradual process. She stepped forward. A man in front of her, apparently satisfied he had reached his boss and momentarily forgetting that other people existed, took one large step backward, directly into her. The impact was enough. Her phone left her hand in a clean arc and hit the concrete with a sound that every smartphone owner recognizes immediately with a sinking feeling in their chest. The specific sound of a screen making contact with hard ground and losing that argument. She looked down at it. The screen was a spider web of cracks from corner to corner. She looked up. The man who had stepped into her turned around. He was about 35, medium height, built solidly, the way men who have done actual physical work are built, not gym-constructed kind. He was wearing a blue BRT driver's uniform, the shirt tucked neatly, the name tag straight. His face was not what she expected. She expected embarrassment or defensiveness or that particular Lagos male expression that means, I know I did something wrong, but I am absolutely not admitting it. She expected him to already be constructing an excuse. Instead, his face was open, calm, and after one look at her cracked phone and then one look at her expression, he started laughing. Not a cruel laugh, not a dismissive laugh, the genuine, helpless laugh of a person who has registered the full comedy of a situation, even while understanding that it is also a problem. His shoulders shook slightly. He pressed his lips together trying to talk and could not. She stared at him. She said, "Oga, are you blind? Is something wrong with you? Look at my phone." He pulled himself together. He said he was sorry. He was genuinely so sorry. But the way she shouted "Oga," the speed and the volume of it, he could not help it. He said sorry again, more seriously this time. She told him sorry did not fix a cracked screen. He said, "You are right. What model is it?" She looked at him, looked at the uniform, looked back at him. She said, "You will replace it on a BRT driver's salary." And here is the moment that Adaize would think about for a long time afterward, long after everything else had been revealed and the whole story had made sense. Because in that moment, something crossed Emeka's face. It was brief and she almost missed it. It was not offense, it was not pride. It was something quieter and more private than either of those things. The expression of a man who has heard a version of that statement before and has made his peace with it. He reached into his pocket. He removed his wallet. It was a plain thing, brown leather, worn soft with age, the kind of wallet that has been used and not replaced. He opened it and counted out a number of notes and placed them in her hand. The amount was enough to buy 3 of her phones, possibly 4. He told her to get a better model. He said the camera on her current phone was too small for her face anyway. Then he stepped onto his bus and the doors closed behind him and the bus pulled into traffic and was gone. Adaize stood on the pavement holding the money and watching the bus disappear into the chaos of Ikorodu Road and felt something she could not immediately name. Not gratitude exactly, not attraction, not yet, something more like curiosity. The specific curiosity that arises when you encounter something that does not fit any category you already have. A man who laughed at the wrong moment and then solved the problem without drama, and then paid without showing off, and then gave her a compliment about her face as he walked away. Who was this person? She would find out. It would take time, and it would change everything. The second time she saw him, she thought it was coincidence. He was at the same bus stop 2 weeks later, standing slightly apart from the main crowd, drinking from a small bottle of water, watching the street with the particular patience of someone who is never in a rush, even when everything around them is. He saw her at the same moment she saw him. He raised the water bottle slightly in greeting. She nodded and looked away. But then the bus came and they ended up in adjacent seats, and he asked about the phone without preamble, just pointed at it and asked if it was better. And she showed him the new one, and he looked at it seriously, like a man inspecting work he had commissioned, and nodded and said, "Good, the camera will do you justice." She looked at him. She said, "You are very strange." He said, "I have heard that before." The third time they saw each other was not at the bus stop at all. It was at a suya spot on a side street near the hospital, one of those roadside spots that has existed for so long it has become a landmark. Plastic chairs and wooden tables and the smell of roasting meat covering the entire block. She arrived at 7 in the evening after a shift that had lasted 11 hours and had not included a proper meal. He was already there, standing at the counter waiting for his order, still in his uniform. They stood beside each other and ate and talked, and somewhere in the middle of it, she laughed for the first time in 3 days. She did not realize until later that this was what happened, that in the company of this stranger in a bus driver's uniform at a roadside suya spot, she had laughed the way you laugh when your body has decided despite everything, the unplanned laugh that arrives before you have approved it. They talked for an hour and a half. He asked about her work, specifically, not the vague, polite version, but real questions. He asked what it felt like to work in a government hospital in Lagos, what the challenges were, what the patients were like, what kept her in that particular work when she could probably earn more elsewhere. He asked about her father, gently, after she mentioned him in passing, and listened to the whole answer, including the parts she did not usually tell people. He told her very little about himself. She noticed this but did not press. She assumed he was private. She was right, but not in the way she understood. He drove her home that evening in a Toyota Camry. She did not pay attention to the exact year or condition of the car. She was too busy finishing a thought she had started at the suya spot. He walked her to the gate of her compound, said goodnight with no performance and no pressure, and left. She stood inside the gate for a moment after he drove away, in the dark, thinking. Chisom was awake when she came in, sitting on the sitting room floor, surrounded by the fabric she was learning to sew, looking up with the expression of a younger sister who has already decided she knows something. Adaeze sat on the couch. Chisom waited. Adaeze said his name was Emeka and he drove BRT buses. Chisom blinked. She said, like the government buses, the ones on Ikorodu Road. Adaeze said yes. Chisom put down her fabric carefully. She said, Ada, you are a qualified nurse. He drives a public bus. Mama will not just collapse. Mama will wake up and collapse again. Adaeze looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then she said, I am not marrying his occupation, Chisom. I am marrying him, if it gets there. There's something about him that I have not seen in anyone in this city. He listens like your words matter. He asks questions like he actually wants the answers. He has no performance in him. Everything is just real. Chisom stared at her sister for a long time. She had known Adaeze her entire life. She had watched her sister date carefully and end things quickly and maintain standards that most people found intimidating. She had never once heard her sister talk about any man with that particular quality in her voice. The quality of someone who has found something they were not even looking for and is not quite sure what to do with it. Chisom picked up her fabric again. She said quietly, just be careful, Ada. Adaeze said, I am always careful. What neither of them knew, what the whole of Surere and Lagos and Onitsha did not know, was the truth of Emeka Chukwuemeka Martins. He was the founder and chief executive officer of TransLink Metro Limited, a private transportation company that operated 47 BIT buses across 4 major corridors under contract with Lagos State government. He had started the company 8 years ago with 2 buses bought on credit and a route nobody else wanted. He had grown it with the kind of slow, unglamorous, persistent work that does not make the newspapers but makes the balance sheet undeniable. He drove bus number 14 on the Ikorodu to CMS corridor every Tuesday and Thursday morning, not because he had to, not for show. He did it because he had made himself a promise the day he signed his first major government contract and looked around at his new life and felt a sudden terror that he was losing something he could not name. He drove because it kept him connected to the city as it actually was, not as it appeared from behind the glass of a corporate office. He drove because it reminded him that before the money, he was still the same man. He drove because he was, at his core, a person who believed that wealth was only worth having if it did not change who you fundamentally were. And he had a rule. The rule was simple, and he had kept it without exception for 5 years. He would not tell any woman about TransLink Metro, about the investments, about any of it, until he was completely certain that she wanted him and not what he represented. He had tried relationships before the rule. He had experienced the particular loneliness of not knowing whether a person was with him or with his bank account. He had decided he would not live with that uncertainty again. So when he met Adaeze,
Ezeobi met Adeji at a bus stop on Ikorodu Road.
And she looked at his uniform, and her first question was whether he could afford to replace her phone on a driver's salary. He felt something he had not felt in years. He felt hope. Because here was a woman who saw exactly what he appeared to be: a bus driver, a man in a uniform, a person of ordinary means. And she was still there, still talking, still laughing at the suya spot, still calling him strange in a way that was not an insult. She was still there not because of what he had. She was there in spite of what she thought he had, or rather, in spite of what she thought he did not have. That was the point. That had always been the point. The family sitting room in their Onitsha home had been specially arranged for this occasion. Not arranged the way you arrange a room for a welcome, arranged the way you arrange a room for a judgment. Every chair was occupied by someone with an opinion. The sofas along the walls held aunties of various ranks and seniorities, each one dressed with the particular deliberateness of a woman who wants it known that she has made an effort, and therefore her words carry extra weight. The center chair, the one with the best view of the door and the best angles for expression, was occupied by Mama Obi. Adeji's mother was a woman who had survived genuine hardship. She had raised 2 daughters in a city that did not make raising daughters easy. She had worked and saved and gone without so that her children could go to school and become qualified and stand on their own feet. She was not a bad woman. She was a woman who had been taught very specific things about what safety looked like for her daughter in a country like Nigeria. And those things were a man with money, a man with a visible occupation, a man whose family name meant something. She had been taught that love without those things was a luxury the poor could not afford. She believed this completely. She was wrong, but she believed it completely. Adeji stood before the assembled room. 6 months of Emeka, 6 months of conversations and suya and evening drives and the slow, careful, real thing that had been building between them. Emeka had asked to be introduced to her family. She had agreed. She had tried to prepare herself for this room. She had not prepared enough. Mama Obi looked at her daughter for a long moment. Then she said in the specific tone she reserved for situations she found both inevitable and disappointing, "So, a bus driver." Aunt Ngozi, who had been waiting for her turn the way a person waits to play a card they are very confident about, leaned forward. She said, "Adeji, we sacrificed for you. Your mother sacrificed. We sent you to Lagos. We paid school fees, nursing school, good money, genuine sacrifice. And you are coming to tell us that after all of that, the best candidate you have found in that entire city is a man in a bus company uniform?" From the corner came laughter. 2 of Adeji's cousins, the ones who had always traveled together in their judgments, covering their mouths with their hands but not their eyes. Auntie Chidima, who had always been the one to say the quiet part out loud, said, "What do we tell people? Seriously, I am asking. When someone asks at a function, what does Adeji's husband do? We say he drives bus? In this family? With this background?" Mama Obi raised her hand slightly, and the room quieted. She said the Noachuku boy, Chidi, was still unmarried. His father had filling stations in Anambra State, Delta and River State. His mother was a good woman from a good family. He had expressed interest before, and the door was not closed. Adeji felt the familiar tightening in her chest that this room always produced in her. The feeling of being assessed, of being reduced to a problem, of being offered solutions to a problem she had not asked anyone to solve. She straightened her back. She said, "I am not marrying Chidi Nuachuku or his father's filling stations. I am not marrying anyone's portfolio. I am telling you about a man I have been seeing for 6 months who has treated me with more genuine respect than I have received from most people in this room. And I am doing so because he asked to meet my family, not because I am asking for permission." The silence that followed was the heavy kind. Mama Obi looked at her daughter for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, controlled. She said, "Then you are choosing disgrace. I am your mother, and I am telling you clearly, you are choosing disgrace. And when the time comes that you understand, I want it recorded that I said so today." That night, Emeka found Adeji sitting on the front step of the compound. He had heard enough from inside. He did not ask her to explain what happened. He sat beside her in the warm Onitsha night, and the sounds of the neighborhood settled around them, and he simply waited with her in the way that people wait with each other when words are not the right thing. After a long time, he asked her, simply, if she cared what they thought. She considered this properly, not defensively, not with the quick answer that pride produces,
but genuinely. She thought about her mother's face. She thought about her cousins laughing. She thought about the Nuachuku boy she had met once at a family event and found spectacularly hollow. She thought about the last 6 months, about the suya spot, and the real questions, and the way this man sitting beside her had never once in 6 months tried to impress her. She said, "I care what I think, and what I think is that you are the most honest person I have encountered in this city, and honesty is the rarest thing Lagos produces." Emeka looked at her. She saw that expression again, the one from the bus stop, the private one that meant something she had not yet been given the full context for. He said, "Ade, there's something I've been meaning to tell you." She said, "Tell me tomorrow. Tonight, I just want to sit here." He stayed. He sat beside her until the compound got quiet and the stars appeared above the Onitsha rooftops. He tried to tell her 3 more times over the following weeks. Something always interrupted. Later, she would decide that this was not accidental. Later, she would think that the universe had a specific plan for the timing, that what was coming needed an audience larger than a quiet conversation, that the truth would arrive in a way that made it impossible to dismiss or diminish or explain away. The truth was coming. It just needed the right stage. The Lagos State Registry on Campbell Street was not a romantic venue. It was a government office with the specific character of Nigerian government offices everywhere. Fluorescent lights that flickered every few minutes as if considering whether to give up entirely, wooden benches worn smooth by decades of people sitting and waiting, forms on clipboards attached to the counter by pieces of string, ceiling fans that moved the warm air around without meaningfully cooling it. There was a laminated sign on the wall with the opening hours. One of the laminate corners had peeled away. Nobody had fixed it. Adeji sat on the bench in her cream dress. It was not an expensive dress. She had bought it 2 weeks earlier from a boutique in Yaba, trying on 4 before settling on this one because it was the one that made her feel like herself, rather than like she was dressed for someone else's idea of a wedding. She had done her own hair. She wore the earrings her father gave her mother on their first anniversary, simple gold hoops that her mother had pressed into her palm the morning before she left for Lagos, without comment, without softening anything she had said in Onitsha. Just the earrings placed in her palm and a look that meant something Adeji had decided to interpret as love, even if it could not express itself cleanly. Chisom sat beside her, already crying, the way Chisom cried at every significant event, including Adeji's nursing school graduation and the time they found a lost puppy and the series finale of a show they had been watching together. Her crying was not sad, it was the overflow of feeling from a person whose emotional container was simply not large enough to hold it all.
2 of Emeka's friends sat across from them. They were quiet men, both of them, the kind of people who spoke carefully and observed everything. They kept exchanging glances with each other throughout the proceedings, small glances that contained entire conversations, and at the time, Adaize attributed this to the general strangeness of the occasion. Later, she would understand what those glances meant. They were the glances of 2 people who knew the secret and had kept it for years and were now watching the moment that the secret became irrelevant and did not know whether to be relieved or nervous about what came next. The registrar called them. The ceremony was 22 minutes. It was not decorated with grand words or theatrical emotion. It was 2 people making a legal and personal commitment in the most straightforward form available, witnessed by a sister who could not stop crying and 2 friends with everything they knew behind their eyes. When Adaize signed the register and her pen lifted from the page, she was no longer Adaize Obi. She was Adaize Obi Martins. She looked up, found Emeka's face. The relief on it was the most unguarded thing she had ever seen on a person. It was not happiness, not exactly, though happiness was part of it. It was relief in its purest and most physical form, the kind that starts deep in the body and works its way up through a person's entire frame. The relief of a man who has been carrying a specific and significant weight and has finally been allowed to set it down in the right place. She had no context for it yet. She filed it away and held it carefully. That evening in the hotel room, he sat on the edge of the bed. His posture was different from usual, not the relaxed, composed stillness she had come to know, but something more gathered, more intentional, a person preparing themselves for something. He said, "Ada, I need to tell you something tonight. I need you to hear all of it before you react. Whatever you feel when I finish, I need you to let me get through all of it first."
She sat across from him. The seriousness of his voice produced a specific quality of attention in her, the clinical alertness that nurses develop, the full-body listening that means every signal is being received and nothing is being filtered. He reached into the jacket folded beside him. He removed a document and placed it on the bed between them. She picked it up. Certificate of Incorporation, TransLink Metro Limited. She turned the pages. Tax filings, audited financial statements, an asset register that listed 47 buses, 3 commercial properties, and equity positions in 3 other companies. The numbers in the asset register were not the numbers of a comfortable man. They were not even the numbers of a wealthy man by the ordinary use of that word. They were the numbers that appeared in newspaper articles about people in a different category entirely. She looked at her husband. He said, "TransLink Metro is mine. I built it. I have been its CEO for 8 years. I drive on Tuesdays and Thursdays because I made myself a promise when the company got big enough that I would not lose the part of myself that existed before it. The Camry is one of 6 cars. The uniform is real. The driving is real. Everything you experienced of me over these 6 months is real. The only thing I withheld was the scale of what I had built, because I needed to know, I needed to be certain that what you felt for me existed independently of this." He stopped. He looked at her. He said, "I am a driver, Ada. I just also own the company." The room was absolutely quiet. Adaize Obi Martins sat with this information for what felt like a long time, but was probably less than a minute. She held the asset register. She thought about the bus stop on Ikorodu Road. She thought about the worn leather wallet, the unremarkable Camry, the suya spot, the real questions. The 6 months of a man who had no performance in him. She had said that. She had identified it exactly, and she had been right about it, just not in the way she understood. She thought about her mother's sitting room in Onitsha, the arranged chairs, the cousins laughing behind their hands, the Nwachukwu boy with the filling stations, the words "choosing disgrace" spoken with quiet certainty by a woman who had been entirely, completely, spectacularly wrong. And Adaize Obi Martins began to laugh. Not the polite laugh of a woman managing a situation, not the nervous laugh that fills silence, the full, real, unstoppable laugh of a person who has just received information so specific in its irony that the body cannot process it through any other response. It came up from somewhere deep and filled the hotel room completely, her whole body involved, her eyes watering, one hand pressed flat to the bed to steady herself. Emeka watched her. After a moment, because it was impossible not to, he started laughing too. When she finally came back to herself, when the laughter exhausted itself and she could speak again, she looked at him and said all she could think about, the only image in her entire mind, was her mother's face when she found out. He laughed again. She laughed again, and in that hotel room in Lagos, with the registry stamp still fresh on their marriage certificate, Adaize Obi Martins became, in the truest sense, a team. The press conference was at a hotel conference room on Lagos Island. TransLink Metro Limited and Lagos State Government were announcing a 12 billion naira expansion that would add 2 new BRT corridors and create employment for over 400 new staff. It was a significant announcement by any measure. The room was full of journalists and government officials and business people and cameras. Emeka Martins stood at the podium in a suit, not the blue uniform, a dark suit, well cut, the kind of clothes that communicate a certain weight without announcing it. He spoke clearly and without excess. He outlined the expansion, the timelines, the employment projections, the community impact. He was impressive in the specific way that people are impressive when they know exactly what they are talking about because they built the thing themselves. And beside him, in a deep burgundy dress with her father's gold earrings, stood his wife. The cameras caught her. The journalists noted her name. By the time the press conference ended and people were filing out and finding their cars, the information was already moving through Lagos at the speed that information moves in an age of smartphones and group chats and blogs that update every 30 minutes. By 5 p.m. that evening, Adaize's registry photo, the simple one taken by Chisom on her phone outside the registry office, cream dress and gold earrings and Emeka's hand in hers, was on 3 different Lagos lifestyle blogs. By 8 p.m., it was in every major WhatsApp group that counted itself as connected to Lagos Society, Onitsha Community, Igbo Diaspora, Nigerian Twitter, Nigerian Instagram. By 10 p.m., it was a full conversation. By midnight, the aunties who had not attended the wedding were awake and calling Chisom's number because they no longer had Adaize's. Chisom, who had been quietly enjoying this particular evening enormously, answered some of these calls and declined others with the precise discrimination of someone who had strong feelings about who deserved access to her sister's information. By the next morning, Mama Obi, who told her daughter she was choosing disgrace, had revised the record of events in her own mind with the efficiency of a person who understands that personal narrative can be flexible when circumstances require it. She had told 3 different people by 10 in the morning that she had always seen something in that young man, Emeka, that she had said from the beginning there was a quality to him that a mother knows. Adaize's phone produced a continuous stream of notifications that day, messages from people she had not heard from in years. From the cousin who had laughed behind her hand in Onitsha, "Adaize, congratulations, we always believed in you, you know we did." From Aunty Ngozi, a voice note so long it broke into 2 parts, talking about how she had always found Emeka impressive. Could Adaize please greet him warmly and also mention that her son, Chukwuemeka, was looking to expand into the transportation sector? She placed her phone face down on the table in the Banana Island house and stood at the window looking out at the Lagos Lagoon. The same city, the same people, the same voices, completely different frequency. Emeka came and stood behind her. He told her about the call from her mother to the office. He told her what he had said. Her wife would call when she was ready, and not before. She turned to him. She held his face in both her hands, the way you hold something you are certain about. She said, "I want you to know something clearly. I would have married you in that uniform, with that Camry and that worn leather wallet and the Tuesday and Thursday driving route. I want that to be something you know without any doubt." He closed his eyes. He put his hands over hers. He said, "I know." He said it the way a man says something he has been waiting a long time to say and can finally say out loud. "I know." That was everything. That was always everything.
Now we must talk about what happened to the people who laughed. Because in this story, the way in this world, what you send out finds its way back to you. Not always as punishment, not always as drama. Sometimes it comes back quietly. Sometimes it comes back as a closed door or an unanswered call or a moment of recognition in a crowded room where you understand completely, with no room for comfortable reinterpretation, what you did and what it cost you. Aunty Ngozi submitted her son Chukwuemeka's curriculum vitae to TransLink Metro Human Resources for a senior management role 3 weeks after the press conference. The application arrived in the HR system and was processed normally. It moved through the standard stages. Eventually, it landed on the desk of the HR director, who brought it to the attention of Adaize, who, as the CEO's wife, was increasingly involved in company culture and hiring philosophy. Adaize read the CV carefully. She held it for a moment. She set it down. She asked the HR director to send the standard rejection communication. She did not add anything to the letter. She did not remove anything. She did not use it to send a message. She simply allowed the process to be what it was. The application was not strong enough for the role. That was the whole reason. The cousins who had laughed at the registry wedding attended the first anniversary party in their best outfits, having secured invitations through Chisom, having sent multiple messages in advance to confirm their attendance. They arrived to a waterfront venue on Victoria Island and stood in the reception line. They waited a long time because the line was long. When they reached Adaize, she greeted them by their full names, both of them, correctly, without hesitation, with a warm smile. She asked after their families. She asked after their work. She wished them well. She moved on to the next guest. There was nothing to fault in any of it. That was the thing about Adaize. There was never anything to fault. The smile was real. The warmth was real.
The memory was also real, but it lived quietly behind the warmth, not in place of it. She was not a woman who needed to perform her victory. The situation was performing it for her simply by existing. The full Onita family arrived for the proper introduction ceremony 4 months after the press conference. They came in numbers. They came in matching asoebi fabric, purchased specifically for the occasion, a blue and gold combination that had been selected and distributed via a family WhatsApp group that had been conspicuously quiet in the months surrounding the actual wedding. They came with presents and prayers and the prepared warmth of people who have recalculated a situation and arrived at a new position. Mama Obi sat in the Banana Island sitting room across from her daughter. She looked around at the house, at the view of the water, at the evidence of a life that had taken a shape she had not foreseen or supported. She looked at Emeka, who had received her with genuine respect and no visible score settling. She looked at her daughter. She said, "I always knew you had sense, Ada. You have always had your father's sense." Adaize poured her mother's tea. She poured it carefully, getting the temperature right the way her mother had taught her, adding the milk second. She handed her mother the cup. She smiled. She did not say anything. There was nothing left to say that had not already been said by the house around them, by the water visible through the windows, by the life that had been built, by a woman who was told she was choosing disgrace and had chosen correctly anyway. She thought of her father. She thought of the thing he used to say, that stubbornness was not a flaw but a fuel, that the question was only what you chose to burn it on. She had burned it on certainty, on the conviction that she knew what she was choosing and why, on the refusal to let the volume of other people's opinions drown out the quieter and more reliable voice of her own knowledge. The ancestors, she believed, were pleased. Back to the ballroom on Victoria Island. Adaize Obi Martins in her gold dress, Lagos arranged before her like a stage set that has been reconfigured since the last time she stood in a room like this. The same people, different postures, different eyes, the kind of respect that cities produce when they have recalculated someone's value and arrived at a larger number. She watches a man she recognized from Auntie Ngozi's stories cross the room to shake Emeka's hand, holding the handshake slightly too long, the way people hold handshakes when they want something. She watches a woman whose name she learned from a blog post, a Lagos society who had made a comment online about the registry photo in the early days, standing at the edge of the room, looking magnificent and looking everywhere except at Adaize. She watches her mother seated at the family table, accepting congratulations from people she does not know with the practiced grace of a woman who has told this story so many times that it has become the version she believes. She catches Emeka's eye across the room. He is in a conversation with 3 people who want things from him. He is patient and present with all 3 of them. But when he catches her eye, something shifts in his face. A small thing, a private thing, the specific look of a man who is very glad to know where his person is in a crowded room. She thinks about Tuesday mornings, about the route on Ikorodu Road. He still drives it, not every week now, but when he can. She has driven with him twice, sitting in the bus, watching Lagos through the large windows, watching the city in its realest form, hawkers running beside stationary traffic, children in school uniforms picking their way through the morning rush, women with trays balanced on their heads moving through impossibly small gaps in the crowd. He drives with the same unhurried patience he applies to everything, the same open face, the same man who stepped backward into her on a pavement and laughed first and solved the problem second and gave her a compliment about her face as he walked away. The same man. That is everything. That has always been everything. There is something this city does. Lagos will look at your Tuesday and declare it your forever.
It will look at the surface of a thing and make its verdict and deliver it at maximum volume and with the full confidence of a place that has never been wrong about itself for a single moment. It will see a blue uniform and a worn leather wallet and an unremarkable Camry, and it will tell you with absolute certainty that you are seeing a man of small means and smaller prospects. It will gather your family in a sitting room and arrange them into a jury and ask them to render judgment, and they will do so gladly, because that is what families in this city do when they are afraid, and love is the only language they have for fear. And when you refuse to accept that verdict, when you sit on the front step and say, "I care what I think," when you sign the register in the cream dress with no family present and the flickering fluorescent light and the peeling laminate sign, when you do all of that because you have decided that you know the difference between a man's performance and a man's character, and that the character is the only thing worth choosing, Lagos will call you a disgrace. Let it. Because Adaeze did not marry a bus driver. She married a man. She married the man who asked her real questions, the man who listened to her answers, the man who drove his own buses because he did not want wealth to separate him from his own integrity. He married the man who needed to know with complete certainty that she wanted him before he could show her everything. He married someone who understood that the most important thing a person can be is honest, and who built his entire test around that one principle. The bus company was never the point. It was never once the point. The man was always the point. And that is the lesson, the one this city forgets to teach, the one the sitting rooms and the WhatsApp groups and the blog comments do not carry. That the truest wealth available to any woman is not what a man has, it is who a man is when he has nothing to prove and nobody is watching, and the uniform is real and the wallet is worn and the car is unremarkable, and he is still, completely and without performance, himself. Adaeze Obi Martins knew this at a bus stop on Ikorodu Road before she knew anything else. She held on to it through the family sitting room and the missed calls and the whispered laughing and the word disgrace spoken in her mother's quiet voice. She held it all the way through to tonight. And tonight, Lagos is bowing.
Sit with that for a moment. Because Adaze's story did not happen in another century, it is not a distant tale. It is happening right now in your city, in your family, around someone's kitchen table. Someone is being pressured right now to leave a relationship that does not look impressive enough. Someone is being given the Nwachukwu boy with the filling stations and being told this is the sensible choice. Someone is sitting on a front step somewhere, asking themselves whether their own quiet certainty is worth more than everyone else's loud opinion. I want you to leave a comment below and answer this honestly. Have you ever judged someone's partner before you knew the full picture? Or have you ever been the person who was judged? Tell me your story. Because this comment section is for real answers, not polite ones. If this story sat in your chest the way a true story does, share it today. One person. Send it to the one person in your life who is being laughed at right now for a choice that only they fully understand. Subscribe and press the bell. Because next week, we are telling the story of the woman who smiled through every insult, attended every family event, shook every hand, and appeared to accept every humiliation with grace. And then, when the time was exactly right, she removed herself from all of it quietly and completely, and watched everything fall apart without her. That story has no explosions in it, no confrontations, just patience and precision. And it will stay with you for a long time. The ancestors are watching, and they are proud of you for listening.